Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Circling the Bases, proudly a part of NBC Sports EDGE. I'm your host, Colin Henderson. Joining me today is our very own Drew Silva, as we are here following up on a unfortunately unexciting Sunday morning game here as the Dodgers thoroughly trounce the Marlins in Miami. Drew, how's the weekend going?
Good, man. Yeah, I guess the takeaway from today's game is that the Dodgers are good and the Marlins need offense.
Yeah,
and that'll do it for this week's show. Thanks for
and that's what you come here for, is that hard hitting content. I will say, when I looked at the Marlins, I know they just I forget who they just DFA'd, but like I was looking at that lineup, just the starting lineup for today, and boy, just for a team that has really nice pitching options, there is just nothing on that offensive side of the ball that really gets you excited, especially with no Jazz Chisholm, who obviously is injured right now. I mean, when you're looking at John Birdie and Garrett Cooper as like the linchpins of your offense, things aren't ideal.
Yeah, Brian Anderson had a big homer today, but that was the only run that the Marlins scored against Julio Urias and the Dodgers bullpen. We knew this coming into the year, right? Like, I think it's probably why Derek Jeter stepped down as whatever his role was, CBO. I think he was like, all right, we've got this pitching, let's go spend on some offense. And and I think ownership was like, well, no, we're making money, and it needs to be addressed. I feel bad for Kim Ng, the first female GM, who is the GM of the Marlins. They did a nice profile on her during the broadcast today. Like, if ownership is not going to back you, like this past offseason would have been the time to strike. If you're not going to spend money then to back up Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez, and I know Trevor Rogers has been a letdown, but the pitching that they have, to not pair that with some legitimate bats, it's a dereliction of ownership, if that makes sense.
I think a great way of phrasing that there. Coming up on the show today, everyone, Drew and I, like I said, are going to be covering some big stories around the league. Get you ready for week 20 of the fantasy baseball season. Playoffs and head-to-head leagues are right around the corner, so we are in full crunch time there. And we'll be answering your questions live right here on NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to this in podcast form, be sure to check out these live Q&As every Sunday during the regular season, following the thrilling conclusions of our MLB Sunday Leadoff games. And before we get to your questions, though, just a reminder, if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands by predicting what will happen in Major League Baseball, on the PGA Tour, NASCAR circuit, and in the Premier League. We also have a special contest on Tuesdays and Thursdays called Battle of the Bets, where you can agree or disagree with our experts for a shot to collect some cash. So let's get to some of those top stories, and let's stick with that Dodgers-Marlins series. And let's talk about Sandy Alcantara for a little bit, because he threw another gem last night as he, I think, all but stamped his name on the Cy Young Trophy in the National League. His fourth complete game of the season, he beat the Dodgers 2-1. And this is even more notable because I believe entering the game, he had an ERA of over 14 against the Dodgers in his career, including getting blown up in his last start against that same team. Instead, he goes 9 full innings, gets out of a bases-loaded jam in the 9th to close it out. I love the confidence that Don Mattingly continues to show to Alcantara, continuing to give him a little bit more the opportunity to get out of games rather than the quick hook that we're so used to seeing from everywhere else. But I mean, that was an exciting game last night that unfortunately we didn't get today during the Sunday game, but once again just showed the dominance that Sandy Alcantara can be against probably the best lineup in all of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, he's just become baseball's premier workhorse. I feel like I'm out of adjectives to describe how good and composed he is, and the way he works deep into games is so valuable in fantasy. And I agree. I mean, what are the odds right now for the Cy Young Award? He's got to be like a minus 400.
Yeah. I'll look
but yeah, I mean, he's got the entire arsenal. Again, I feel like it's almost been run into the ground, all the things that you can say that he's done well this season. And really it started last season. I mean, he's turned into, again, like the ace of all aces, and for what he could do against that Dodgers lineup. I said on our Thursday podcast that I felt like maybe the Dodgers had some holes, but like is the back end of their lineup really that effective, but then you see Max Muncy starting to get it going. Chris Taylor is certainly capable of getting it going. Gavin Lux has had some good stretches, and it's just incredible the depth they have. Like, for another team to lose Walker Buehler for the rest of the season, they haven't had him for a long time, and he's going to be out next year too. A lot of teams couldn't recover from that, but the Dodgers, they slow played Dustin May's recovery. He comes back and looks fantastic. He's added a changeup. Now he's a 4-pitch pitcher with all the tools to be a long-term stud. The depth is incredible. They can deal with Max Muncy having a bad 4 months.
Yep.
And have, I think they had the second best July in all of franchise history, and now they're putting together the best August in franchise history. So I think when I said that on Thursday's show, it was maybe just I was like projecting because I'm a Cardinals fan, and I want to believe that the Cardinals are as good as the Mets and Dodgers and Braves, but now this is a juggernaut. And I mean, if baseball's crazy, especially when you get into these like 3-game. I know that they're not going to play in the 3-game wild card round, but like 5-game, 7-game series, anything can happen. But this Dodgers team looks poised to make a very deep October run yet again.
Yet again is right. I believe they, after today's game, if I have the stat correctly here, they are 66-12 when scoring first in games. That's just the dominance that you expect from this team because they score early and the pitching continues to hold up throughout. Obviously, you mentioned losing Walker Buehler. They will be getting Clayton Kershaw back soon. And that is a note for fantasy managers out there because it does look like Dave Roberts did say that they are going to move to a 6-man rotation upon Kershaw's return. So that's Kershaw, Urias, Dustin May, Gonsolin, Tyler Anderson, and Andrew Heaney, which I think is a perfectly smart move for reality. But from a fantasy perspective, it means you might lose out on a start from any one of those guys that is on your roster right now, at least a start, if not 2, before the end of the year. Just keep that in mind. You might not be able to get much of a 2-start pitcher from any Dodger moving forward if they continue to stick with the 6-man rotation. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. We're going to list off some 2-start pitchers toward the end of the show, but you get it. I mean, they're playing for a World Series. They've got the division locked up. What is that lead now? 19 games.
Yeah.
And they showed a graphic on the broadcast today that 1995 Cleveland won their division by 30 games. That's the best of all time. I don't know. Maybe the Dodgers can push toward that level or, get pretty close to that mark because I don't know, the Padres are kind of a weird team right now. And the Fernando Tatis Jr. thing, I think from a human element standpoint is a big downer for that clubhouse.
Yeah.
And so the Dodgers are obviously running away with this. They're going to try to keep everyone healthy, give them extra rest. And it just makes sense. But that's the reality of fantasy sports. You're dealing with real life baseball and then fantasy baseball. And sometimes there's a disconnect.
Yeah. And when you look at this Dodgers team, though, obviously you're talking about 6-man rotation now. Put that same Dodger team in the postseason and take 2 of those arms out of the rotation and put them in the bullpen. Just shows the deeper depth that this team can go to when all of a sudden Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney are coming out of the pen because that makes the most sense for them.
And that's the way it's going to work in October. Managers get very quick with the hooks. If a guy is looking a bit off in the 4th inning and he's getting around to like the 3rd turnover of the opponent's lineup, you might see him pull him. And it's really nice to have a guy that can come in and dominate for 4 innings of long relief, which the Dodgers have. And not many teams have that kind of depth, pitching depth. Like, I mean, I'll say it over and over. What the Dodgers are, I mean, they have the stars, but then they have guys that they can plug in. Yeah. And get you, through the marathon that is the season. They're just a very well-built organization, and it feels like they're going to be that way for a long time.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like it's going away anytime soon. No. Let's stick about pitching here. Jack Flaherty for your Cardinals threw 85 pitches in his last rehab start. Only gave up 1 run. Could be activated this week. He is a welcome sight to Cardinals fans and to fantasy managers who have either been bitten by the Jack Flaherty bug or are hoping to pick up the last remnants of it. Talk to me a little bit about what this Flaherty's return means for not only your Cardinals, but also for what fantasy managers should really expect for the rest of the season, as he is hopefully a shot in the arm for both of those teams.
I wish I had a good answer. I don't know what to expect. Like you said, a lot of people have been burned by Flaherty in recent years. And he's got that slap tear in his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
So he looked really good in his latest rehab start. The velocity was there, like you mentioned. But is he going to be able to maintain this with still like a balky shoulder that I don't even know how you can fix a slap tear. I mean, that would require a serious surgery, and maybe he'll have it eventually. I'm a pessimistic Cardinals fan. Like I'm always, worried about, anxious about what's going to happen next. It shouldn't affect my mood as much as it does, because I'm 35 years old and married, and it shouldn't affect me. I know you're a Yankees fan, and it affects you the same way. This is why we like baseball, because
exactly.
It's sad that like our mood on a day-to-day basis is so affected by our baseball teams, but it's fun. I'm skirting around the question because I have no idea what to expect. I mean, he gets the Reds first. I think you'd probably play him in fantasy. Like that Reds offense is not good. Joey Votto's done for the season. Not that he was having a great year. It is in Cincinnati, and obviously that's a very homer-friendly ballpark. But he got the pitch count up in his last rehab start and looked really good. So, if he's on your IL, activate him, put him in there. He gets the Nationals in his next start. I think that would be next Tuesday or Wednesday, early next week. So Reds, Nationals, if he doesn't look good against those teams, then I'd be worried about his career, honestly. He's one of my favorite pitchers, man, and he was so good in that second half of the 2019 season. I was like, this guy is going to be a really special pitcher, if not for the Cardinals, somewhere else. And when a shoulder pops up for a young dude like that, there are like career effects to it. And I don't know, I would start him in fantasy for those two starts, Cincinnati and Washington, but I would be a little bit cautious about it. I guess I wouldn't really have high hopes, is what I would say.
Yeah. I think that's the conversation here, is like, what is the perspective that you have on here? You're not expecting 2019, like looking like a Cy Young candidate here. If you're talking about, if Jack Flaherty from now to the end of the year can be a 3.5 ERA pitcher who gets the occasional win, who gets that stuff, I think that's perfect. That's what you should be expecting here. Expecting the guy that you hope to draft at the beginning of the season and was hoping going to be, a top 10 Cy Young type pitcher. That's just, don't expect that from here on out. Like you mentioned, he's got two very cushy matchups to start off, assuming that he does get activated and plays Wednesday, as would align for him. It's a great to start to get back into the major. So hopefully that shows enough to get him where you feel confident starting him on that third start moving forward. Still available in 39% of Yahoo leagues. That number should go up a little bit.
Yeah, it will.
With him finally coming off the IL. If he is available in your league, I recommend going to grab him now, just because I think there are a few pitchers out there, a few players out there, period, who I think can hopefully be a shot in the arm for your team at this point in the year. Most of those are either out for the season already or won't come back with enough time to really help out.
Yeah, I mean, the upside is there. I mean, we've seen what he can be in the past, and I think the velocity thing in his last rehab start was super promising. Like maybe the time off really helped that shoulder. The shoulder is weird. I say it all the time, but it's kind of just like a cavity, So when something goes wrong with it, it's not like you can have Tommy John where you pull a ligament out of your thigh and you wrap it up and you take 13 months off and come back sometimes better than ever. The shoulder just doesn't work like that. It's a mystery to surgeons. I think there's just no real way to fix it other than rest.
Yep.
But like we were talking about, teams needing like really good middle relief in the playoffs. If he can just be that, honestly, like moving into October, I think the Cardinals would totally take that. You got Wainwright probably as your game one starter. Jordan Montgomery's been fantastic. Game two. Yep. And then you can go Michaelis or Quintana. You might not really need Flaherty to be a starting pitcher, an effective starting pitcher. If he can be like a 3-inning middle reliever, that would be really beneficial to the team in real life terms.
Let's talk a new injury that came up this week as Aroldis Chapman heads to the IL for a bad infection from a tattoo, which, if that doesn't feel like a beautiful bow to wrap on the Aroldis Chapman 2022 season, I don't know what is. Obviously, this is not expected to keep him out long term, so he should be back before the end of the year. I think there is there was a real hope that maybe Chapman he was starting to find his footing just as Clay Holmes started to lose his, that maybe there was an opportunity for you to kind of buy low on Chapman. He becomes the Yankees closer for the remainder of the year and runs with it. I think this puts a pretty hard kibosh on that, especially knowing that Chad Holmes is expected to be activated from the IL early this week. You'd expect that he would then slot right back into that closer role as Chapman rehabs this infection. Congratulations, Aroldis Chapman. This is I think the weirdest injury of the year so far. I think this is the one. And we had a couple really weird ones last year.
Yeah.
Jesus Luzardo breaking his pinky while playing video games was up there. But like, this is, I think, if I'm running through the Rolodex, this feels like the oddest injury of the season so far.
Yeah. Last year, someone like tweaked their knee while carrying luggage down some steps.
Yeah, that was the other one too.
There's always like some slips in the shower.
Yeah.
There's a long list of kind of funny, that's a bad term for it, but just weird baseball injuries that usually happen off the field. I don't know. It's a frustrating situation, especially for a Yankees team. Like, I was just pulling up their depth chart, man. Woo, on the IL, just among relievers,
yeah.
Albert Abreu, Zach Britton, Miguel Castro, Aroldis Chapman, Scott Efros just went on there too. He's a guy that could have maybe, picked up some save opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Chad Green, Clay Holmes, hopefully back early this week. Michael King, that's fractured elbow. Yeah. And yeah, we were talking before we hopped on. That happened like in mid-July. And that's kind of toward the end of July, like right after the All-Star break. And I feel like that's when the Yankees started to not look so invincible. Mm-hmm. And I know you're a Yankees fan, and he's just a reliever, but like, man, sometimes having like a dominant setup, man, like that just helps you, set up a blueprint for a game. And they just don't really have that right now. If a starter gets pulled early, they're kind of in trouble. I'm interested to see how Clay Holmes comes back. He was really struggling right before that injury, but I think you could probably blame the struggles on that injury. Like, it's just, it was lingering back spasms. It's not like a serious problem, but he needed some downtime. So hopefully he comes back and looks as good as he has looked since they got him from the Pirates. I mean, yeah, he would be the obvious guy that's going to take back that number one spot, I think.
Yeah, and I think he's been the only person outside of Chapman at the beginning of the year that Boone feels comfortable handing the ball to in that high leverage role in the 8th or 9th inning. Yeah. And we've seen him do a couple 2-inning, 4-out, 5-out kind of saves. I could see those moving forward. You mentioned Michael King before. I completely agree with you that injury seems like the real tipping point of when the season started turning a little bit, mainly because the offense started slowing down. Yeah. And that's okay, so long as you continue to win every game 3-2 thanks to the strength of your bullpen. All of a sudden, Michael King is not available to suddenly go 2 innings of big high leverage relief to get the ball to Clay Holmes, who then closes it down. That was the plan for the most part of the year. Then obviously he leaves, and now suddenly there's 5 to 6 outs that you need to finish throughout the game. Yankees offense was not covering that, and then the pitching wasn't picking them up on the back end. So I agree with that there. Obviously, Clay Holmes, I'm assuming that this rest brings him right back to where he goes. I think he was losing control of the ball. I think he was just getting overextended. I also think that for his first real job closing for the Yankees, I think he hadn't really run into bumps yet. And all of a sudden, this bump really kind of derailed him for a hot second. I think this break gives him a chance to refresh and come back. I would expect, if for whatever reason Clay Holmes was dropped in your league, go grab now, because I think this is a guy who could very much be a huge help in the saves category for the remainder of the year, because I just don't see any real competition, especially now with Chapman on the IL. There's no competition for saves in New York. It's going to be his unless he gives it away. Yep,
exactly. And what the Yankees did really well over the first 3 months of the season is they won games in a lot of different ways. Like, it wasn't always the Bronx Bombers or, Garrett Cole's dominant starts. Like, they would do it a lot of different ways. And that's what you need to be a great baseball team. And they've kind of lost that with all of these bullpen injuries stacking up. And if the offense falls flat, or, Frankie Montas gets blown up, it looks like a little bit of a different team right now, but they're still in first place. They're going to win the AL East. They're looking ahead to October, and I think they'll be fine. I know there's a lot of Yankees panic because they're passionate fans, and I get it. And there's a lot of beat writers who cover the team, so you're getting a lot of information. Like I always joke that like if you just followed the Yankees on Twitter, you'd think they're like the worst team in baseball because people overreact. But I get it.
We're well known for that.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be a very nobody wants to face the Yankees in October. Like they've got all the pieces, and if they can get their bullpen healthy, then they'll definitely look a lot better, look more like the team that they were in April and May and June.
And obviously getting that rotation healthy as well. Yep. We're good. Severino coming back. He looks like he will be ready to go by mid-September and fully stretched out for a postseason start. Nestor Cortez goes on the IL. But again, it's supposed to be a short IL stint. I think if anything, this might be a good spot for him to just take a break.
I agree with you.
He's been throwing far more innings than he was ever expected to throw. So this might be a good time to just manage arms before you go into October.
Yeah, you'll see those like phantom IL stints where is the guy really injured or does he need a break? I think this is actually an injury, but what they're saying is it's not too serious, and they needed to kind of find a way to stunt his workload a bit.
Yep, and they need to find a way to stunt Severino's too, who has really only thrown X number of innings, a very short amount of innings over the last
since
3 seasons.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so just getting him to come back, and both those guys just being healthy for the spot, and then obviously. You mentioned Jordan Montgomery for the Cardinals, the Harrison Bader coming over.
Yeah, sorry about
the other
that.
side of that. I mean, look, Monty that's an incredible 4-game stretch from Monty. I didn't see all year for the Yankees, so enjoy it because it's been phenomenal. I like him a lot, but wow, he's been incredible. But obviously, Harrison Bader coming over in that deal, he is expected to be activated sometime middle of this month of September. Ideally, he is back as well for a postseason run.
Yeah.
Let's start.
I want to just, I just want to, like, I think Montgomery is a perfect fit for the Cardinals because they have one of the very most pitcher-friendly stadiums in the majors. They have a great defense, and you can see it. Like he's using his four-seam fastball 30% more than he did with the Yankees because he doesn't have to worry about cheap homers, or he's okay with, putting the ball in play a bit more than I think he was when he was pitching in the AL East. And I'm a Bader believer too. I think he's going to fit in well there. I'm a little bit worried about how plantar fasciitis affects his skill set. And he's been out longer than the Cardinals expected when they first put him on the IL. Like it's been well over a month now. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but he's an elite defensive center fielder when he's healthy, maybe the best in baseball. And I think there's offensive upside there for him to tap into. And maybe it's not going to happen until next year. And maybe it happens down the stretch this season. But I think that's going to be a trade that benefits both teams in the long term. I want the Cardinals to lock up Montgomery to an extension, though. I love what I've seen so far.
I mean, how could you not?
I know.
Chad here on the side says, what is your level of Justin Verlander panic? So for those who are unaware, Verlander leaves the game early today during his start. After 60 pitches due to a calf issue. Okay. So we are still waiting on more word from any type of tests, but I will say, I think from a level of concern or worry about him, the fact that it's a calf issue and not an arm issue makes me feel, or a shoulder issue makes me feel a lot more confident that this is probably a lot of precaution, probably, especially now with how they're going to wrap up that division within the next week or two. They can be very slow on this. I would not be shocked if they put him on the IL stint, like we just said, to just kind of give him a rest before the end, before they enter the postseason. Obviously, like the Yankees, like the Dodgers, they're looking at a title. They're not really looking at the regular season anymore. So I would say from a fantasy perspective, I'm a little worried about it just because we might not get as many Verlander starts as we expected when we woke up this morning. But that being said, the fact that it's a calf issue, until someone tells me otherwise, I'm not particularly worried about him, his health moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was looking for the update right before we hopped on, and very relieved that it's just the calf. And even if it's a calf strain and he has to take a 2-3 week break, like we talked about, that might be beneficial for him. It definitely changes his odds of winning the American League Cy Young Award, though. He had kind of emerged as a heavy favorite recently. But Dylan Cease, if he stays healthy, and man, the White Sox are such a weird team, but if he can somehow pitch them to the AL Central, that'll help the narrative. Or, if Verlander has to take 3 starts off, Cease could certainly overtake that. So I just saw that PointsBet and DraftKings pulled the American League Cy Young Awards odds down. So I don't know. Hopefully you got your Dylan Cease ticket in this morning or something.
Yeah, because those odds are going to get much worse for him there.
Yeah.
Let's start talking about week 20 here. Like we had mentioned before at the start of the show, for a lot of people in head-to-head matchups, this is either the last week or one of the last 2 weeks before postseason begins. So, I mean, a crunch time here. Drew, why don't you start us off with a couple of the 2-start pitchers that you're targeting for this upcoming week to hopefully get these guys some W's?
Well, there are some obvious ones. Corbin Burns, Pirates, Diamondbacks, Max Fried, Rockies, Marlins, Carlos Rodon, Padres, Phillies, Tony Gonsolin, Marlins tomorrow to wrap up that series. And then the Padres, Zach Gallen, who has been awesome in the second half. He gets Phillies, Brewers, George Kirby, who has been tremendous lately. And man, if it wasn't for Julio Rodriguez and Adley Rutschman, he might be more in the AL Rookie of the Year conversation. He gets the Tigers and then at the Guardians. Then you got Jose Barrios, Cubs, Pirates. I know that he's been like so frustratingly up and down, but Cubs, Pirates, obviously. Ranger Suarez, Diamondbacks, Giants. He's been very good in the second half, looking a lot more like the 2021 version of himself. Frankie Montas gets the Angels and Rays. I think you just plug them in and hope for the best. And then there's some more questionable ones. Andrew Heaney, Mets, Padres. It's, two good offenses there, but I think he's a guy that you plug in. Cole Irvin gets the Nationals and Orioles. I think you definitely plug him. Matt Manning, who is available in more leagues than he should be. I know he's been hurt a lot of the year, but when healthy, he's been tremendous and a former like top 20 prospect. And with all the pitcher injuries that the Tigers have had to struggle through this year, it'd be nice if he could just stay healthy and like prove to be a long-term ace for them. Pablo Lopez gets the Dodgers and Padres. I think you play it and hope for the best again. Taijuan Walker, Dodgers, but then the Nationals. So I think you plug him in. Lucas Giolito, Royals, Twins. Clevenger is talking about being up and down. His like strikeout rate has vanished, but he gets the Giants.
He's been a very interesting case this year.
He's just, he's weird, man. And his delivery is so strange. I hate backing a Mike Clevenger start when I'm betting or playing fantasy. It's just like, this can go anywhere.
Right. It could be dominant or it could be a blowout. It's one of the two. Yeah.
I think that's probably about it. I mean, JT Brubaker has been pretty good for the Pirates, Brewers, Blue Jays. I don't love that. The rest of them, Brian Bello for the Red Sox, he's got a ton of talent and looked pretty good on his last turn, but I think I would stay away from too much of the risk. Javier Assad for the Cubs looked okay in his debut against the Cardinals, but he gets the Blue Jays and then a rematch at St. Louis, so I'd probably steer clear of the rest of this list.
I think that's totally fair. By the way, Matt Manning available in 78% of leagues, coming off of, like you said, quite a few nice starts. So
that'll go up after our show. We
that's
push,
exactly it. That's the kind of tastemakers we are. Let's talk about keep talking pitching here. Nick Lodolo had a really nice start today. Gave up 3 runs over 7 innings against the Nationals. He has continued to show very intriguing starts that we expect from obviously a rookie coming into this year. Overall, he has a 4.3 ERA, 1.45 whip, and 82 strikeouts to 29 walks across 67 innings. You really like those strikeouts. The walks you'd love to see down a little bit more, as you'd love to see that whip as well. But he's been pitching very nicely. Obviously, he is a pitcher for the Reds, which means that you're struggling to find wins. You're struggling to find quality starts and such. But he's been an intriguing arm that not only will we talk about for the remainder of this year, but he is starting to show the signs of someone, him along with Hunter Green, as we've seen prior to the season. He's coming back from injury now, expected to go out on a rehab assignment. But those two have looked like they could be a very nice centerpiece for the Reds moving forward when it comes to that rotation.
Yeah, I like going into the year, I was like really impressed with what the Reds had put together in their rotation. There have been some injuries and some disappointments. And Hunter Green throws hard, but it's kind of straight, and MLB hitters can hit that. He needs to develop a bit more. I like his slider, but he needs like a sinker and like a changeup. It's easier said than done. Lodolo's looked awesome. I think he's impressed me I don't know. There have been those ups and downs, like you mentioned. You wish that he could rein in the command a bit, but he's got the arsenal to be a long-term stud. You're going to expect an elevated ERA there, pitching in Great American Ballpark, and if he doesn't rein in that command, there's not going the starts aren't going to be very long, and he can get into some serious trouble. But overall, I think what he's done this year has to be very encouraging for the Reds as they do whatever they're doing there. The Reds front office and ownership group. Don't get me started. Like, what did the owner say before the season? Where are you going to go? Like, when
exactly. Like, you're a fan of my team. Like, what are you going to do? Not watch the game? Yeah, that was essentially the bullet point.
That should be like in the handbook when you take over a team. Don't ever say something like that.
Don't ever just assume your fan base, all right, and just assume that they will be there for forever. Because look at the 12 people that show up to an Oakland game. Yeah, that will argue that is not a infinite bank that you can continue to draw from.
Nope.
Let's talk about Ronald Acu1a a second here. Not in the Braves starting lineup on Sunday versus the Cardinals. He has been kind of struggling. I mean, he has not been Ronald Acu1a for this year, obviously coming off of the major ACL injury that he received last year. When you're looking at him for the remainder of the season, I mean, I'm not sure I put him as a top 50 player for the remainder of this year. It just doesn't seem like he's going to have enough time to get it going.
Yeah.
But how much does, assuming that he continues on the path that he is now and having a very mediocre by his standards years, how much do you think that will impact where you think about drafting him in 2023?
Man, I'd love it if he fell out of the first round or something.
Oh, it would be, yeah. And the fact that we're even having that conversation is pretty shocking for a guy who was a lock inside the top 3 just about any year he's healthy.
Yeah, and I there's a lot of group think in fantasy baseball too. Yeah. So whatever happens to finish out this season, I think by the time we come around to next spring, people are you can explain away the struggles because he's coming back from that knee injury. He also had a calf thing. He leads the league in caught stealings. But he stays aggressive, which is nice. You like that as a fantasy player that he keeps trying. The power's down, the exit velo is down. I think it's going to be nice for him to have the off season. And I don't know, the Braves are probably going to go on a deep run, so he's probably not going to get much rest. But to have a full off season and then come into next spring, I think he's going to be a top 5 guy. I don't know if he will go within the top 5, but that's probably what I'm going to be looking at him as a guy that in a down season can have 25 stolen bases. And double-digit home runs. I know he just got to 10. You'd like to see more power, but I there's full reason to believe that he can rebound. Still a very young dude and just dripping with talent. So yeah, I mean he's been a bit of a bust this year, and I thought he was going too early in drafts coming off that ACL. I don't have any shares of him, not because I don't like him. I just it takes a while for guys to come back from a major ACL. There were some other ligament issues in that knee too. It wasn't just the ACL. But I totally believe in him long term, and going into next year, I think he's going to rebound. And it helps that the Braves got Michael Harris II into the mix. I think that takes pressure off Acu1a defensively, just having that dude roaming center field, and you can DH Acu1a a little bit more. They haven't really been playing Marcell Ozuna a lot recently. That's a whole nother story for maybe a whole nother show. He's out of the lineup again on Sunday night. But yeah, I think you can explain away the struggles for Acu1a, and that when it comes around to next spring, we're all going to be really high on him again.
Yeah, I would like to think so as well. And honestly, like you started out with, I would love for people to not be high on him, because I have absolutely no problem if I'm sitting at the back end of the first and all of a sudden Ronald Acu1a is still available to me. I will gobble that up fast. You mentioned Michael Harris. He gets the long-term extension this past week, as does Julio Rodriguez. Get the bag, young boy, because that was an impressive contract for a guy who has not played a full season yet. 220 million guaranteed, with the possibility of it going up
475 or something.
475, I believe, with player and teamed opt-outs after the 2028 and 2029 seasons. So maybe we don't see the full extent of this contract with those opt-outs, but a full no trade clause. basically they just gave him the Fernando Tatis treatment. Like, here's the dump truck on the front lawn. Have what you will. You're going to be the face of our franchise till I think 2039 is, I think, when this contract expires.
Oh man.
So genuinely, like, the next 2 decades will be the Julio Rodriguez show in Seattle.
He seems like the kind of player that you would feel very good about giving that money to. And someone was asking me yesterday, a friend at a bar, like, what does Julio Rodriguez's extension look like? And I was like, dude, I don't. It's very complicated.
It's a very complicated one. Yeah.
It's like an NFL contract, though. There's a lot more guaranteed money where there's like, it can be this or it can be totally something different. I don't know. You compare that contract to what Michael Harris II got. What's 8 years, $72 million guaranteed, can go up to 10 years, $102 million if he triggers the 2 options. And I know Michael Harris II is not Julio Rodriguez, but it's, I don't know. It makes it that Harris contract look pretty team friendly, doesn't it? If he's as good as he shows, as what he's showing right now. And I know there are things you can poke in Michael Harris's game, but I think the defense will play. And I think he's a power speed threat, like a 2020 guy. Oh yeah. And I don't know. It's there's a juxtaposition there that I find kind of fascinating. But Michael Harris is an Atlanta dude, and that's where he wanted to be. And I'd take $72 million guaranteed if someone wants to give that to me. But yeah, Julio Rodriguez is a superstar and seems like a really hard worker and like has great energy about him. He's the guy that you would commit perhaps $475 million to.
Yeah, I mean, if he's their Griffey, if he's their next Griffey, then then lock him in now, because we've seen with plenty of other players. You look at the Yankees and Aaron Judge right now. Like, if you don't get this stuff done early, you might be putting up against when he goes for free agency.
I'm sure Juan Soto loved that contract too, though.
Juan Soto is loving that contract. He's loving every contract that's coming out because he's just looking at free agency in 2.5 years and saying, I will take it all, please. Mm-hmm. Him and Shohei, both of them looking at that. You mentioned the Braves. I still don't know. I still have no concept. Just trying to figure out what is the concept of how much he gets paid.
I don't know, man. He
hits the open market. He has 2 players in one. I genuinely don't know how. Like, is $50 million a year completely out of the realm? I don't think it is. 55, 60 million a year. I still don't think that's that crazy.
Yeah, we had John Morosi on the podcast. That was right before the trade, or after the trade, right around the trade deadline, and he's like one of the most plugged in guys in the industry, and he was like, I have no idea what it's going to look like. Yeah, I was thinking like maybe you go short term, but like crazy AAV, like $75 million a year. Wow. For over 4 years. I don't know. There's never been anything like this.
No.
Man. And with the Angels owner, Artie Moreno, saying that he's exploring a sale. So I found it odd that the Nationals would trade Juan Soto in the midst. They're going through a sale as well. Right. And then I had to check myself. It's like, cause I'm just thinking as like a baseball fan, who's a kind-hearted person, not like a billionaire who's like, no, when you want to sell a company, you like just drain all of you
tear it to the bolts and then
you slash the budget, and which is kind of sad, but that's the way that capitalism works, I guess. So I think Ohtani is not going to return to Anaheim. Maybe they should probably explore trading him this winter. I read a report. I think it was John Heyman in the New York Post was saying, or it was in the Athletic, so that must have been Ken Rosenthal. He was saying that Moreno was like presented with trade proposals for Ohtani, and he had already kind of told people around him that he was going to pursue this sale, and he turned down those offers. And they were like huge packages. So maybe they won't trade him. Maybe they'll just let this ride out and go to free agency. But yeah, that's going to be very interesting 2 winters from now to see how that all plays out.
It makes it all the harder when you're not just playing this from like a GM standpoint, but you have to play it from the, how does new ownership want to handle these type of conversations, and what is the selling point, and is this a positive or a negative, having him or losing him, and all of those extra factors that go into play, which is already going to be an incredibly difficult signing to begin with, and then throw all of that on top of it makes it even harder. You had mentioned the Braves, by the way, and their stuff. The Michael Harris deal, as soon as I saw that, I go, I don't know. It must be phenomenal to play in Atlanta, because they have between Acuna, between Ozzie Albies, between Michael Harris, like these guys are signing under slot contracts for the potential that they could have if they wanted to bet on themselves Aaron Judge way. They could continue to play this out and probably have a much bigger payday coming out. Instead, they lock it in early for, again, I'm not going to look at anybody and say 72 million is not worth it. That I will never be the person who says that, but it is pretty shocking that I think Albies was, a 10-year, like $70 million contract, if I'm remembering correctly. The 70 million guaranteed is phenomenal, but Ozzy's,
it was less than that, actually.
Was it less than that?
Yeah.
Am I still giving him too much? Because it's amazing that the Braves have continued to put together these unbelievably great, before anybody even has the thought about a free agent market, like lock these guys in long
Austin
term.
Riley. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about Austin Riley too. So, he got a lot of money. He got paid. Yeah. He earned his dollar figure.
Yeah.
So it's impressive to see what the Braves continue to do with that stuff, because they have locked up a good core of their group. And obviously they will have to deal with what to do with Dansby Swanson at the end of the season. He is a free agent at the end of this year. How much do they feel that he needs to be a part of this team? How much do they feel that they can find a better option elsewhere? That will be very fascinating. But the Braves have just done a continually great job of locking up their young talents before there's ever a conversation about extra zeros.
Yeah, it's cliche to say, but they've built a really impressive culture. Like, I think that's the word. And we had Sarah Langs on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about how the players just they really trust Alex Anthopoulos, who's their club president. And so, hats off to them. It's crazy in this era of baseball business and individuals, individual players creating their own brand and being more conscious of that than ever, that they would be able to get all these, like you said, kind of under slot deals, for lack of a better term. Props to them. They have built an incredible, Matt Olson got an extension right when they acquired him, before he even put on a uniform. So more power to him, man. And they that's an impressive organization as well. It's right up there with the Dodgers, the way they do business. And I'm jealous that they have this young core locked up long term. Who else? No team's even close to doing what they have done business wise. It's just smart. And hey, maybe some of these guys will be a bust, but I feel like they're all really believable players, long term. You can project these guys will be awesome over the terms of their contracts.
Right.
None of them are signed through age 35. Matt Olson was pretty young. I think he just turned 28 years old, and I don't know. They've done a great job, and it's impressive. It's a culture, I guess. That's the only word I can come up with. For
I can't really think of any other group that has locked up their core for not a laughable amount of money for the rest of the year. My initial thought was maybe Texas, with how much the $500 million they tried to give out in this offseason to Seager and Semien, but
and then
even then,
house.
Those are guys on the back end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
The Braves continue to do really impressive stuff.
Yeah. I like Seager long term, but I don't. The Rangers story is so strange. Ownership had expectations that they were going to be good this year, just by throwing.
That's optimistic. Even optimism.
I didn't know.
Wow, that's a lot.
I didn't know anyone that thought they would be anything other than what they are right now. Maybe they should have been closer to 500, but you signed John Gray and the rest of your pitching, it's not there. Martin Perez has been very good, but they should have known we don't have the pieces. This is, I thought this was going to be step one in moving from rebuilder to contender.
Right.
But I don't know.
It's going to take a 2-3 year period. You invested now, that's great, but you weren't going to spend $500 million on 3 players and expect that suddenly changes you from a basement dweller in the West to all of a sudden a wild card favorite. Those were, because you're not winning that division, not with the Astros being what the Astros are. So at best you were hoping for a wild card. And even that was highly optimistic for a 1-year step in the right direction.
Yeah. Their owner must have thought he bought a basketball team. You need more than 3 guys.
Exactly. Boy. Although that minor league system is very enticing.
Yes,
so, if they can, you mentioned the pitching, the 1-2 of Rocker Leiter to go along with Gray within the next few years, that could be a complete game changer when it comes to them getting back. So I hope that they continue to invest, because they've kind of already thrown their cards to the center of the table, so to speak. No use getting getting scared now. Like, this is, if you're ever going to invest, now's the time.
No, man. Yeah. Those contracts aren't going anywhere. Those secrets.
Exactly.
I mean,
and
you've committed.
They're not movable either. So they're there, and they're going to be there for the long haul.
You're in deep. So keep swimming.
But that just about finishes up our show for today. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss an episode. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to rate and review us. Drew loves 5 stars, and I like making him happy. So those 5 stars are always helpful. And while you're at it, be sure to follow NBC Sports Edge on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch to be informed of all of our live shows, Q&As, segments, articles, and more, so you can stay up to date on everything around the league and join in on the action. And for all of you with the fantasy football drafts coming up now and in the next couple of weeks, please be sure to head over to NBCSportsEdge.com/NFL to get all of your fantasy football draft questions answered. Matthew Berry back on the NBC team, so make sure you are checking him out there as well. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleDon'tLie, and you can follow Drew at DrewSilv. Chris and I will have a fresh new episode out on Wednesday morning, so make sure you don't miss it. So until then, best of luck to your fantasy teams as you fight for the postseason. Stay safe out there, and as always, thanks for the listen.